Fundamentally, there are two ways of looking at the world. And these are modes of thinking that we can swap to back and forth. You have a big picture way of thinking and a little picture way of thinking. A big picture way of thinking is looking at the world and taking in all the details and looking at trends and statistics and just basically observing how things are proceeding. And there's a little picture way of thinking about your own life, what's happening in your own life. And of course, you can't entirely separate the two because we're all part of some picture. We're part of the big picture de facto. You're an individual in the big picture, and the big picture has an effect on you. And the little picture is on some microscopic level contributing to the big picture. And so, yeah, in some sense, you can't really disentangle the two. There's at the very least important overlap. But one thing I've noticed over the last 5 years or so in particular, but even before that, is that we as denizens of the internet, in particular of YouTube, have become so enamored of big picture thinking and what is happening out there, the macroscopic trends, that many of us have forgotten to think in little picture terms. I know many, many people who get carried away by big picture thinking and looking at the big picture as if it were indicative of things in their own life. Now, sometimes it can be. Obviously, if there's a trend or a statistic that seems to reflect something that's happening in somebody's life, then it's safe to say that it makes sense, right? Again, we're individuals, we're part of the big picture. But on some other level, the big picture needn't have a profound effect on your life because it may or may not collide with the little picture that is your existence. Now, I'm a big advocate of realism in the sense of you might have some overwhelming stats out there, and these definitely need to be taken into account. And at the same time, I'm not one of these people who thinks that I'm not a stat. We're all stats at the end of the day. But it is possible to get carried away by just how extreme the big picture thinking, which is the nature of the internet, in particular YouTube. On YouTube, we typically talk about big picture ideas. Take somebody like Bathrobe Man, aka Hamza, who has created his YouTube empire. And you can see that it's all just big picture, but it's meant to be applied to the little picture, right? Talking about trends, talking about generalities. Most of the new black pill channels, relatively new, like Wheat Waffles and others, are talking about general trends, right? And the thing is, I think in terms of being realistic, what goes hand in hand with, accepting the reality of statistics and trends, something that also needs to be borne in mind is the stat may or may not apply to you. And if you get too bogged down in the big picture of how things are going and how the world is falling apart and how everything is basically miserable, and sometimes I've fallen victim to this too, admittedly, then it's really easy to forget the little picture stuff. And say what you want about normies who just go about their business, their daily lives. Maybe they're not cued into all the secrets out there and the secret knowledge that people profess to have. Well, okay, fair enough. But what makes normies on some level pretty effective as individuals is they typically don't engage in big picture thinking. They're focused on their own lives. And they can't obviously override the fact that they too are a statistic and contribute to statistics overall, but they don't think about it. And I think there's a certain utility to that, unironically. I think that looking at your individual circumstances, you can always make an assessment about this, relatively speaking, and you can also realize that, look, this is the broader trend, but that broader trend needn't be reflective of my own trends as an individual. And I think one of the issues that definitely has arisen in recent years with respect to the black pill, and you obviously have to acknowledge certain realities with respect to the black pill. You have to acknowledge that certain things that the black pill tells us are true. Lookism, mating and dating game, there are a lot of truths to this, in addition to other fundamental truths that are just unpleasant about reality. But even granting that, let's be honest, sometimes people who would otherwise have a chance to improve their own lives get so caught up in black pill ideology, aka a type of big picture thinking, that they forget their own lives. You also see this with political streamers on Twitch and elsewhere. They're so involved in the pettiness of the outside world and what's going on there that they often forget themselves in the process. And in doing so, they lose themselves. So ultimately, what I'm suggesting is a firm separation from the big picture stuff, which is basically online life, obviously, YouTube in particular, but the internet. The internet's all about the big picture, all about the things happening outside of your life typically. And you can be aware of it, you can pay attention, you can even spend a lot of time with it, but at the same time realizing that maybe, depending on the individual, obviously, you are devoting so much time to that big picture that you are losing yourself in the process. And that maybe things for you, potentially at least, could improve if certain measures were taken. If for once you stop thinking about that big picture, forget the big picture. Pay attention if you want, but don't let it dominate your life. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to everyone. Some people are working on their lives and paying attention to the big picture at the same time, for sure. But I think having observed a bunch of people who get bogged down in particular in quote-unquote online communities, which I would argue is big picture, even if it's local, right? It's not talking about the Queen in England or some event in Afghanistan or what's happening in China. It's local. It still arguably is not directly related to their lives in the sense that it probably isn't helping them very much. I've talked to a number of individuals who got bogged down in quote-unquote online communities, Black Pill, some others, and it took them a while to realize that they were focusing so heavily on that they lost sense of whatever potential that they might have. Now, obviously, not every individual has potential. Some individuals don't have any potential. Others do. But the point I'm trying to make is you should at least take the time to evaluate that potential. Take time off the internet. The reality is the world can actually be burning, but you don't necessarily need to burn with the world. Ultimately, that's my point. Ultimately, that's what I'm talking about. You could be one of those people that ends up burning with the rest of the world, but it's not a necessary chain of events. And I think it's worth doing. And I have to say, in my own life, even though I definitely pay attention to the big picture, after all, I'm a YouTuber, I try not to think about it too much in the context of my own life. And it's become almost an automaticity that I don't really think about the big picture unless it's directly pertinent to my own life. And I'm not going to claim to be an incredibly happy or successful individual, but adopting that as a framework of thinking has definitely helped me to improve at least certain aspects of my life. And I hope it might improve yours as well. Forget the big picture. As always, thank you for tuning in. Please leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. Take care. May the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.